Hey folks!
Hey.
So in this video, Roman and I are going to have a look at reaming to fit. So that will make much more sense in a minute, but it's basically the magic bit of joinery that Robin's going to share with us. It's kind of the chair making joinery technique. Just to quickly recap, we've got a leg here with our tapered tenon, and the reaming is using this kind of tapered bit, which is just called a reamer, to make a nice tapering mortise to match the tapered tenon. And it's just worth bearing in mind that there's a few different ways to do that. So we've shown you using the mortise block, so actually turning the taper directly with a skew chisel on the lathe. And that way you can actually just use any reamer that you've bought, make your mortise block and then make your tenon to fit. And then of course we actually were just using these Veritas ones. So this is a 5/8 tapered tenon cutter, and that marries up with, fairly certain it's Veritas, definitely bought it from the same company. They're sold together and they've got the same taper. Okay, so we're going to have a look at reaming a leg hole.
Yes.
And you're going to show us how we can use the reamer and a pair of dividers to make a really neat and symmetrical, accurate, finished product.
Yeah, I think accuracy is the thing to mention there, because we can adjust our drilling angles as we go down with the reamer if we've made any mistakes. So the first thing we need to do is we need to transfer our sight lines onto the other side of the chair.
Oh, that sounds like a hassle.
Nope, when we drew the line right round the blank at the start, so we know where they need to go, all I need to do is measure where these two marks are, where the sight lines cross, and transfer it onto the other side. It's got inches. So it is 7 1/16 to the top one, 5 to the bottom one.
So I might just grab the template so they can see that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so just so it's maybe a little bit clearer on black and white, these sight lines have got these kind of focal points. So as long as you've got the centre of the hole, all you need is those two focal points to draw from the centre of the hole down to.
Yeah.
So just measuring those and flipping them over to the other side.
And I am measuring from the edge of the board, not the front of the template line.
Great.
So
And this is helpful if they want to mess around with designs. It's probably sensible to have a go at making a chair first based on a plan. But if you want to mess around with it, then this is a good way of transferring stuff. Exactly. But of course you could just flip it over and punch through.
Yeah, it's just knowing where to put that. If you were going to do it that way, you would just measure how far in the front edge of this is on the board to make sure you're putting it on exactly the same part on the other side.
Yeah.
But it's so quick just to measure those two. So we've got 5 and 7 1/16. Make sure you transfer it. So I'm measure that measurement, make sure you don't go and put it on that side of the board. So we'll tick there so we know we're on the right side.
Great.
So 5 7 1/16. So we'll go from the middle of our holes to the sight line and draw a line. An important thing to point out here, you flip the board over, so we're going this way now. When the board was the other way around, we were coming from that direction.
Yes. The line just goes in the same direction though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the important thing is to make sure that you draw to the right one, isn't it? Because
Yes.
the front legs go to the one that's closer to the back of the seat.
Yep.
But if you just look at the template, then it's just always good to measure twice and mark once.
Yeah.
So you can just hold up your template up against it and just double check that you've done it right. So you're just eyeballing the centre basically of the hole.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I've gone through and done a nice long line because we're looking that way. The longer the line is, the easier it is to line up along it. So we'll start, just double check. So this is a front leg. So we'll start with that front leg. We'll just nip this onto the bench first so it doesn't slide around.
Yeah, it's always good getting clamped up. So we've got quite a lot of stuff in the way here, so I might just tidy up a little bit for you. How do you think they would have done this in the olden days? Would these angles just have been, you'd have your bench at a certain height and you would hold your brace against your body at a certain height and you just sight line probably from a spot that you can pick out? They probably wouldn't have drawn lines, would they? I've never seen lines drawn on the back of a Windsor chair.
No, I remember watching that BBC programme with Jim Steele making a chair.
Yeah.
And he straight in, knew exactly where he was going. Yeah,
right.
Brilliant to see.
Jim's a lovely guy.
Isn't he?
Yeah, and hilarious.
Yeah. Where's the knocker gone? There it is. So we just tap those in. Important thing here is you need to make sure you've got clearance underneath, because if your reamer gets held up, it will still cut at the top of your hole and it will widen the hole, but it won't go down. So you make sure you've got some fresh air underneath your board.
Nice.
So, if you remember, we put our angles on here. We'll go back to that.
I did a log to leg race with Jim Steele once.
Yeah, how did you get on?
Not very good.
No.
In fairness, I used to be quite good.
I'm not a
billet
racer.
flew off the lathe, and
oopsie.
the leg looked awful, and I lost by a few minutes.
Yeah, I'm not a
It was
racer.
humiliating.
Do you know?
He really rubbed it in as well.
Did he?
No. Yeah, it was nice. He made a nice leg. Right, so what angle are we doing these ones?
We are 14 degrees on the front legs.
And that says that on the PDF, doesn't it? It's 14 on the front and 20 on the back.
Yep, that's right. There are a few ways of setting your reamer up to do this. We are going to measure, because of the reamer we're using.
Hang on, sorry. There we go.
Thank you. We are going to use this and we're going to run it along this nice straight line. You can take away half of this angle and you can measure up to the side of your reamer, but we won't go there, that will just confuse you.
Yeah. Yeah, so you just treat it like the drill and imagine the centre of the reamer.
We need to have another 90-degree line for the upright angle.
So again, this little square is basically just the sight line, but it's turning your sight line into a plane.
Yes.
So it's kind of extending your sight line upwards into a two-dimensional plane rather than just a straight line. And it just helps you stick to that sight line more readily. And it's nothing more complicated than that.
No, it's triangulation. 3 points lined up as a straight line, isn't it?
Yes.
So I make sure that the edge of that is pointing right down onto the line. I have my angle set, and one final thing we need to do is
Cup of coffee,
sit down, and
a couple of biscuits.
yeah. So the one final thing we need to do before we start is to set the depth that the leg is going to go into the chair.
Okay, so we've checked in the book, it's 8 3/4. It is worth pointing out that the best way to get these measurements is actually from the PDF that we've got downloadable. So head over to the website, download the PDF, you can print it off, and it's got all this information on it.
Yeah.
So that's 8 3/4.
Yeah.
Nice pair of dividers.
Very nice pair of dividers. You can make a pair of dividers with 2 pieces of wood with a nut and bolt on the end. Just sharpen the ends a bit. All you've got to be able to do is make a distance and hold it. A good tip is when you've set it, just push them into a piece of wood, and then if you bang them into anything while you're going, you can just pop them back on there and make sure they're still at the right width.
Great.
So,
and probably worth, if we just drew between that and just wrote 8 3/4.
yeah.
Because we probably have, what does 3/4 look like? Probably have that similar measurements for other components, right?
We will, for the arm posts in particular. So, the first thing we need to do is just to start our hole off a little bit.
Okay. Do you want me to sight from the side?
Yes, please. So, we are sighting along the middle of our bit adapter here, not the front edge of the reamer. We want these 2 lines parallel here, not the one on the front of the reamer. Tell me again, Barn, which way am I
Okay,
going?
so away quite a lot. That's pretty good. Yeah, away a tiny bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, keep on going away, 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 away. Yeah, you leant right back, I'm afraid. Yeah. That's
Oh, yeah.
it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to
Yeah.
move that while I start it.
Great.
A bit of tear out there from the drill, but that'll disappear as we ream. So I'm just making sure that I'm along my sight line as well. I'll show you a good way of checking that in a minute.
So it is worth pointing out, Robin just quickly checked himself then. He slid the sliding bevel up and just looked from the side. So you don't have to have a mirror, you don't have to have someone sighting for you.
No.
But it is a step-by-step, slowly, softly catch your monkey, right? You do a little bit and see how it looks.
Yes. So we've gone in a little bit there, so we're going to pop our leg in. I know it's not time to measure this yet, but I'll give you a good example of what we do. So when we have the score line here on the chair leg. You might not be able to see it on the film, but it's there in the plans. And what I'm looking to do here is measure the distance from this chair seat to the line on the inside of the angle. And I've got about 3/4 of an inch left to go. So we will take the leg out and continue to ream. Now, we are...
So that measurement 8 3/4 is basically just when we're making the leg, when we're sizing the tenon, we've got to have the tenon, the widest part of the tenon was 8 3/4 inches from that score line.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's all we're doing is just checking that the tenon goes in all the way. And then it means that when you've got all 4 legs reamed in correctly, then these score lines will all be at the same height.
Yep.
And that's where the stretchers can go in. It makes it look neat.
So
and
it's
accurate is strong as well, I guess.
yes. Well, yeah, if you haven't got discrepancies when you sit on it, you get even weight distribution.
Nice.
So we get our backwards and forwards plane from the sliding bevel. The other thing you do for alignment is you use this square. And because I've got quite a sore elbow, we're using this great big thing here, so I'm just going to take it off for this bit. Now, in order to line up along this plane, we need to make the very point of the back of the reamer line up with this line. Now I can do that from anywhere in the room. So to make sure we're doing it right, we also want to line it up with this edge. Doesn't matter where on that edge of the T-square, but you need to look down here, touch that edge and line on this line. Now Tom is going to come and do that. So as we move our sight line around there, you can see that we're just starting to line up with the line now. So the very tip of this is in line with this line. We now need to check if it is passing past this point on the way to that line, which as you can see, it's over to the left there. Ideally, this point here would pass that point there and line up with this point here. So we now need to just come this way a little bit as we're reaming. So we now know that we need to come this way a little bit. I'm just going to make sure that we are right on this angle as well. You can't check this too many times, so just keep having a look as you go. So I think we're pretty much bang on this angle. You must be careful to have your sliding bevel parallel to the sight line. As I turn the sliding bevel away from the sight line, you can see it starts to look like this, as not straight, but it hasn't moved. It's the bevel that has. So make sure your sliding bevel is parallel to your sight line. We know we need to come to my right a little. When we move into the right, we must be turning at the same time. We need to cut to the right. And it isn't much. You'll do that a lot of times.
You can get shorter sliding bevels.
You can,
but I think it's it's the kind of thing that you end up moving quite a lot, and it is at first it's quite a slow process, right? And a beginner should take this really slowly.
Yes.
But with a little bit of practice, it's not a long, arduous task getting them to fit.
No, and if you've made a couple of chairs before not doing this, when you do this for the first time, it really is a revelation. So we'll see how our triangulation's going. Brilliant. Right, we're absolutely spot on at the moment. So we will just give you a shot of what it should look like when it's level. Okay, if I swing around now and I align the centre of the bit with the line, it should now pass this point exactly. It's very important that this line here is directly above your sight line, because wherever this is directly above is where you are lining up to. So if it was there, and I lined that with that and that, it would be all the way over here. So it must be right up to the line. There you go. Okay, it's important while we're doing all this backwards and forwards that we still remember to keep checking the depth. This process gets easier every time you do it. So if you're feeling a bit bamboozled now, have a go at it a few times into a bit of scrap and it'll soon become clear.
So you always just do it with a push fit, you never tap it in with a mallet?
No.
I suppose it's important to just do it the same for each leg, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so we're about a centimetre, 3/8 away from there.
Great.
Okay, so we were right on both angles. So we're just going to carry on without putting any extra weight forwards, backwards, left or right. But we will still keep checking because that's quite hard to do. Okay, so I've actually gone a tiny bit back to the left there, but we're not quite there, it's okay. We're good on that angle. Did we say we needed to come back a bit right again? Tiny bit to the right. Just about got that back now, tiny little sniff. Remember, keep checking your depth. We were quite close before.
That is the thing, there's a surprising amount of movement, isn't there?
Towards
Ream it
the
a little
end,
bit
yeah.
and it can move. Anyone that's tried to do sliding dovetail joints will know how quickly it can go from being too tight to too loose.
Right, we are
Ooh.
a 1/16 of an inch away. It's worth noting, if you do make a mistake at this point and you go in too far, note what the distance is and just make sure all your other legs go in that same distance.
Yes.
So long as this distance is equal, on all the legs you'll get an even chair.
Yeah.
It just won't be quite as high off the ground.
And probably use your, if you've got one leg shorter than the other, do that one first, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
If you've got one leg shorter than the other, you just walk around in circles.
You can get special insoles for that.
There we go. We're in.
Spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Great, okay, so that's that leg fitting perfectly. We've got it nicely lined up and we've got the depth right so that you can get all of the legs correct.
Yeah.
Do we now need to mark that leg as front left or something like that?
This leg now belongs in this hole, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so how do we mark that? Is there a...
So the way I was taught this by Curtis Buchanan is we mark the legs 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 is always your front left.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll go...
Where do you mark it?
Just in here. 1, Make sure you don't go too near the hole because you're going to ream that away.
Oh,
2,
yeah.
3, 4. Now, you'll get another mark on. We don't have, because we haven't drilled any holes in, we don't have an orientation mark to put onto it yet, but it will get that eventually.
Great. So then do we just write 1 on the top of the tenon or something? Or
I tend to, because I'm quite clumsy, I'll do it there, there, and there, just because the amount of times I've trimmed something.
Yeah.
And then I'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 line on the floor.
Amazing.
So yeah, put them on in a couple of places, and now you've got a beautifully fitting
Perfect.
tenon.
So next job is basically doing the other 3 legs.
Repeat, yeah.
Yeah. So you guys can do that by yourselves.
Yeah.
And we will see you for a bit more in another video.